Let's talk Indiana. We have problems.
Project 2025. Many of you have already heard about it. Some of you are just learning about it, but much of it is already underway here in Indiana.
This limited series podcast highlights many elements of Project 2025 and how it impacts Indiana.
Okay, welcome back everybody to Let's Talk Indiana. Today is Saturday, August 17th. We're recording a little earlier this week because our very own Dana Black will be heading to Chicago, the DNC, woo-hoo, where we will nominate the first African-American Asian woman to hold the presidency in the United States of America. Madam President, that
Madam
sounds so...
President.
Madam
And it should have
President.
been in 2016, but okay, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah.
And you're
What
gonna
are
be there?
emails?
Oh,
Yeah.
emails.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm here with Dana. I'm here with Mark,
Hey,
myself,
hey.
Mary, and
right.
we are going to dive in this week, and we're going to talk about labor this week. And as you know, our whole endeavor here is really to bring home entities of Project 2025 that we are already seeing here in Indiana. But before we dive into labor is our topic of the week this week. We want to do a little recap of what's happening around in Indiana. And if you didn't know, there's a couple things that actually came out this week. One is Terry Gooden had a debate over at the Indiana State Fair with Micah Beckwith. And the other candidate, which I am going to blank out, I'm sorry, that third lieutenant candidate.
Is
Yeah,
it
the Libertarian?
And I couldn't tell you the name.
Libertarian, yeah.
Sorry.
Oops. See,
It's Rainwater's person. That's all I can say is Rainwater's
under
person.
Under that name, I can't tell you anymore either. You're right.
Yeah, okay. Note to self, the strategist is coming out in me. If people can't remember your name, you're not doing something right.
Start there.
Yeah, start there. So anyway, we're going to show you a clip. Terry had a good conversation, and in my mind, he killed it on the Richtometer. He really did much, much better, and he really showed what kind of policies that the Democrats would bring forward to the governorship. And one question was brought forth to Terry regarding mental health. So let's take a look, because it really encapsulates a lot of the policies that would get moved forward with this team in office.
Bringing that up, and that's going to be in my closing statement, so I have to change that. But you are correct. What's happened in the last 20 years, at least, is the government, or the group that's been in charge of our government in the state of Indiana, has forgotten folks that live in rural areas when it comes to mental health. As a matter of fact, they have consolidated the mental health services that we have into just very small clusters within urban areas, the urban areas of our state. It's very difficult for rural folks to be able to get to those services in those rural areas. The state of Indiana has got to start recognizing mental health providers as a provider of health. Right now, the state of Indiana does not do that, and that is a true oxymoron. We've got to figure out ways to reach out. We have to have outreach to our farmers, and we got to figure out ways. How do we get those farmers? Remember, farmers are independent types, right? I'm one of them. We're independent types. It's tough for a farmer to ask for help. We have to put services together. We've got to put programs together where folks can go out and talk to farmers and get them the help that they need. And you cannot do that. You cannot do that by continuing to cut services and cut funds in the state of Indiana. As my opponent pointed out, my party is the party that wants to defund police, but I have seen not one proposal from the Democrats that said they want to cut local services. Guess what? His partner himself have got a proposal that will cut police, it'll cut fire, it'll cut the emergency services to your home. Thank you.
Wow. I mean, he says a mouthful right there, right? He talks about, the neglect in our rural communities, yet and still the rural communities are the ones that are electing these people to office, which is quite scary in and of itself. I remember when I was working at the state in the IT department when Scott County had that terrible, terrible tornado that came through. And one of our jobs was to go down there and set up a help station for families so they could get the services that they needed after this fallout from this tornado. And we literally were there for 2 days and only maybe 2 people came in. So it speaks volumes to what he's saying. They don't normally ask for help. Yeah, they're very independent. They don't ask for help. But that doesn't mean we are supposed to be in a position where we're not offering that help.
Right. Well, these same governors throughout the country end up saying we don't need the federal government coming and running our business. Then the hurricane hits, then the tornado hits. Hey, federal government, where's your money? We need help.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, here.
Yeah, and I think that we've also pointed out in some episodes previously, when you have a third of Indiana counties don't have a local hospital, that's where some of these services are provided.
Yeah.
So you kind of get accustomed to, well, that's not part of my ecosystem, so I don't have that as an offering. And we have to change the mindset and say, no, you have the right to have these types of services. Healthcare is mental health care. It's all encompassed in part of our holistic approach to make a whole approach to your well-being. He's bringing up some lot of good issues. Farmers are up sunrise to sunset,
Yeah,
and
they
they
are.
are providing such a service to our state and our country and beyond.
Right.
And
And
it,
they're very little respect do they receive from those elected in charge.
absolutely, and they're also being pushed out of their business, right? With those corporate farms being able to swallow up so much land and
Right.
create it, make it difficult for farmers to even sustain themselves.
Ask
Right.
Willie Nelson. That's been his fight for 40 years with the
Yeah.
farm
Yeah,
aid.
yeah. I appreciate Terry Gooden highlighting these things, because someone who's from the city, right? I'm an urban girl.
Mhm.
I don't always understand, right, what rural America needs. In fact, most of my conversation when it comes to rural America is about schools. But this is the
Yes.
same thing. If you're underfunding schools, public education, that means rural communities are having to do more with less. It's the same
Right.
thing with mental health services. If you are not providing the type of places in rural America, or they have to drive, what is it, to another county to get what they need. That's
Yeah.
Yes. We saw that with childcare.
Yeah.
They're showing that in Indiana, the average person in some of the rural areas is driving 40 miles for childcare services.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's like
And
here
that's
from
not
here
always
to
something.
Bloomington.
Right. And that's not even something that could be, say, with sanctioned. It might be just Aunt Millie's, living room, and that's where the kids are going to go because it's the closest or the best thing they could get. It's not one of those ones that's under that umbrella of, hey, this is a, bona fide place. It's very tough for all of them. And they're not going to admit that they need help. That's until they're in that
Exactly.
really tough situation.
And not to mention at the State House last year, they passed legislation and signed it into law that basically reduced the barrier of entry into childcare. So you
Yes.
can be an unlicensed childcare and have up to 25 kids. Like, I mean, what
Yes.
could go wrong?
Yeah, seriously. Well, do you remember when I first came here to Indiana, I heard the story when they were licensing childcares, and nothing against religious services in the state. This is not my point. My point is they were licensing childcare services in religious church, and they were giving them the exception. And wasn't there a young child that it was overpopulated daycare service center, and the child died in the baptismal bathwater?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Those
I just,
regulations are there for a reason.
but how can we get y'all? And y'all have to help me with this one. How do we get rural Indiana, our farmers and the people who populate these places, to recognize that look at the policies that people are writing, right? Look at the policies and stop just looking at, okay, Democrats are evil. I'm not going to vote for a Democrat. But how do we
Right.
get them to see the policies that the people that they're voting for are harmful to them? I don't get it. Like, and you can say that anywhere, right? We can say that anywhere, but
True.
how do we do that and get
I got
them
an
hope?
answer for you that. I
Okay.
really do. My answer for that is it's on us as Democrats to step up and run for office in those rural areas.
Come on.
Because what we're doing is in this election cycle, we have 31 House seats going uncontested. And a lot of those are in our rural areas because some people have bought into the mindset that we can never win those areas. Well, what's happening is we're not having real conversations by saying, hey, let me hear what you have to say and
Mhm.
listen and get in conversation, have a nice political discourse, not an argument. So as a result, folks living in the rural areas are not being exposed to another perspective, possibility,
Yeah.
solution. So we're by default, as Democrats, we're not stepping up and giving choice to our fellow citizens here in Indiana.
I like
Yeah,
that.
and I see it from a perspective of the grandchildren and children are telling and teaching the grandparents about why there's a different outlook to it. There is a party who does think about us, who will fight for us, but because they're siloed of their knowledge of information, which is the only Fox channel they have, or now a News Nation, or whatever other right-wing media outlets out there, that's where they continue to get their news from. So they're hammered with how horrible all these things are that these Democrats are doing, so they won't ever cross the line to even consider it.
Right.
Once that young member of the family leaves and gets to come back and go, hey, you know what? I was just in such and such, and I found all these things out. There's hope in that, but that's such a small piece of the
Yeah.
puzzle. I think it's the big thing goes back to electing those candidates from that area, but getting them to even consider being a candidate in that area. That's a tough one, Mary.
It is a tough one. And the tough one is we have to switch our mindset to think that winning is not always the end game.
Right.
Start somewhere.
Right.
It's a process. If you look at
Yeah.
some of the most successful political folks who have and stepped into the political arena, you don't win the first time. It's
Right.
about having the new conversations, changing policies, bringing awareness to your community, and you might win the second or third time.
Mhm.
And but then when people have hope and live in possibility, then you start seeing the change. But we have to really switch the mindset that winning is not always the end game, and two, when candidates do step up, we need to support them.
hmm I agree. The first time I ran in 16, I obviously did not win my seat, but it was a win. I mean, now we have, there's a place where candidates can go and talk about who they are. There's
Yeah.
a different voice writing articles in the IBJ. I'm not sure if typical Indiana politician, I was bringing something different. And the cool part was, as a African American woman, lesbian, there were other women that came behind me and that ran in that
Yes.
same seat. And so they saw that I could do it. Well, they were like, well, shoot, I can do it too. And they did. And each time
Right.
the percentage of votes that we got went up with every successive,
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
much so that they redrew the district, and it is now outside of Marion County because they saw, oh, these Democrats are making headway.
Yeah.
Running is very important. And I just, and it's going to be good for their mental health if they decide to do something different. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah. Well, I look at the congressional races like Cindy Worth. She is bringing a social studies teacher. She's back at it again in
Yeah.
that same district. She says this is it. Heidi Beidinger. She came in late in the game that first time 2 years ago. Now she's for a House seat. She came in now. The amount of volunteerism that's just stepped up. It's amazing to watch the growth, and it's only because we see. Oh, I remember that name from the last election cycle, and now here it is. We're really bringing it. That's what we have to do. And Mary, you hit it. That's why your strategy wins. Get in the game and show them how you're here all the time. Everybody's going to hate on your game, but watch the haters turn to lovers when it comes to giving the right message.
That's it.
Exactly. And you know what? When the tornado or the hurricane or something happens in the community, doesn't matter if you have a DR next to your name. We're supposed to be working together, and that's what we have to
Right.
start thinking about is coming together as communities and finding solutions for what's happening in our areas.
Yeah, but they letting people who have Teslas tell them, you don't need those things. Pull yourself up by your bootstrap. But they're not putting a snowplow on their Tesla.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you still need somebody to come plow the roads. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
When the snow come. And that's something that happens every year. That's not a once in a lifetime thing. It happens
No.
every year. And I
Multiple
guarantee,
times.
yes, I guarantee they are not putting snowplows on their Tesla or their Range Rover.
Yeah.
Or
And
their-
the other thing we need to talk about, and Terry Gooden touched on it, is the new tax plans rolled out by these two candidates.
Yeah.
They are
Vastly different.
night and day. He brought up a really good point because everybody was really curious of the impact, and the economists stepped in and analyzed it. Let's look at Braun's tax plan.
We're going to cut. Yes.
Cut. And you know what? Interesting enough, I saw it on Twitter this morning. Good old Mike Ball mentioned that Indiana does not have a bad tax plan right now. That's not one of our issues.
Yeah.
Rick,
And they made it front and center.
Right. What had happened, the values increase, which technically is a good thing. I am not saying that the values of our house and the tax structure does not need to be looked at. We always need to look and make sure we can serve our communities better. But the fact that they're claiming our property tax formula and structure is so out of whack compared to all the state. I believe he says we have the 7th lowest in the country.
Something
And
like that.
Yeah. Under
Yeah.
10. Yeah. We're the top 10 of lowest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of lowest. So if you think about it, the property tax base is what serves your fire, your police, and your schools. They didn't give a solution for where that money is going to come from, folks. And then fast forward, of course, Jennifer McCormick puts out a much more holistic and a better approach to our tax plan.
I like
Beautiful.
that. And they never want to talk about where the money's coming from. They just want to talk about the AAA credit rating. But we, like I say all the time, what good is having a whole bunch of money stashed away if you got a hole in your roof?
Right.
Yeah. That rainy day fund needs to be tapped. Is it, are we to the B with billion here yet? for our rainy day fund that the Republicans have been holding on to. Won't pay teachers, won't pay the back to the communities. It's rough to watch.
And it's also scary to think about how the Republicans want to make Indiana like no income tax, no lower the taxes. But how do you take care of the people who need the help if there's not a tax base? Like, no, again, nobody wants to pay taxes. I sure as heck don't want to pay taxes, but I also recognize what my tax dollars are supposed to be used for.
And what they provide.
Yeah. So these folks want to cut it so they can cut the things that we pay for, which is always going to hurt your lower income people, the people who need the services. So I don't know. I struggle with what Republicans want to do when it comes to humans.
Yeah. I was looking at McCormick's tax plan, and you know what I really noticed was the balance. Okay. Her plan provides targeted relief for those who need it, but at the same time, without cutting those essential services to fire, police, and schools. It's not one or the other. We have to change the mindset, just like we were talking about redefining winning. We have to redefine a balanced approach so there is winners on both ends. You're not always going to like everything. We have to start coming to the middle. And I really think her approach highlighted that.
Right. And I thought about it when I read that plan too, was it brings that concept of let's take care of the state at the same time someone like Governor McCormick's taking care of the state with a plan like that. We also have the infrastructure will happen again, which will bring more money back to fix those bridges, those roads, and other systems in the state that they know all too well about, even rail. Let's not lose sight of that. That's still a talk that's out there. That's going to happen. We have to just kicking and fighting get there. It's tough.
Yeah, the other thing that I noticed, one other thing was, lo and behold, when she was doing her tax plan, supposedly she had it vetted by the General Assembly's legislative service agencies.
Good plan.
Whoever thought to have your policy vetted, to make sure.
I did not realize. That's a great point. Thank you.
That's an excellent point.
To make it sound, to make sure that this is actually viable without hurting the local communities, without hurting the fire, the police, the schools, the entities that we all need. So you can't just throw out it just irks me. It's to the core what we want to talk about too today, but a little bit about disinformation. You just can't throw something out there because it sounds good as a soundbite.
But that's what they do. That's exactly what they do.
There's no article. It's just a headline.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole plan is to keep throwing bullshit at you, and then eventually you'll believe it.
Right to the point. Yes.
I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. It's my bad. Yeah,
no,
but it's
so
frustrating. But it's true.
We live it. We live it. Yeah.
We talked about today, we want to talk about truths, and we have to start calling it out. We have to really say, we hear this word all the time about information, disinformation, and misinformation. And as citizens going into an election cycle, when we see things that are out there that are false and not true, lies, we have to start calling them out.
So let's just read a little bit of her tax plan, right? McCormick's plan includes capping property tax increases at 10%, combined with increasing the homeowner's property tax deduction by 40%, increasing personal exemptions by 150%, and increasing the renter's tax deduction by 33%. I hope y'all know what all that means.
Well, you know what? The other thing that I noticed was, I don't know who said it. I think there was a couple people that jumped on who have more of a high level economic background than I do, but they said the plan was something that people could follow and it could actually be implemented. In other words, when you sit down and have to learn it and file your taxes, it's manageable.
Got it.
It's not an economist level that you have to have, right? Yeah.
It's manageable, which I think is kind of key.
So basically, capping increases at 10%. Could save homeowners roughly $23 million in the 2024 calendar year, or $7 million in the subsequent year, according to the fiscal calculation for a 2023 bill filed by Republican Senator Brian Buchanan of Lebanon schools. School libraries, counties, and towns would lose that funding, however. So there's some things to it. There's pushback on it, but
it's a starting point. This is what she's bringing to the table, because you got to start somewhere and start the negotiations.
Yep. So and I don't think the other side really cares about it. They're just throwing it out there just to talk about, I'm going to lower your taxes, but you're not really.
No.
Again, it goes back to headline, and they really are a group of people who want to try and read the entire article. I always get a laugh out of when I open the article up to read, and it says, this is a 4-minute read. This is a 10-minute read. was like, that scares people away. If you said it's a 10-minute read, what? That's like a dissertation.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but people won't get that far into it. They're going to read that headline and go, well, I'm done with that, and move on. And that's why they do it. They just write the headline and walk away. There is no real process or depth to it.
Yeah, yeah. And they keep trying to make it seem like because Braun is a businessman that he must know more about taxes than
You know, that argument of that the millionaire is the genius is so wrong and has been perpetuated over and over. That's not the truth. Look at Trump's case.
I'm laughing. I'm sorry, but I'm like, but he's barred from doing business in the state of New York for what, 5 years?
man,
Yes.
man. That
He's a
guy.
felon, 34 felon accounts. Like, come on, folks. That
Yes.
argument has really gone out to sea.
But people
Yeah.
believe it. You know,
Yeah,
they
they do.
literally go, oh, well, he's a business owner. But of course, Trump is the absolute example of why that's not true.
Right, right.
Business loser.
Loser. In fact, he can't even fly into certain cities because he owes them money. We talked about that last week.
That was too cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think people realize, okay, I think you guys know my husband comes from overseas. If you're a felon, you cannot go overseas in some other countries.
You
Yeah.
can't leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother
You're not
thing.
allowed in England, you're not allowed in Scotland, Wales, the whole, you know.
They will not. They would, if he came there, they would seize his passport and impound the plane and the rest of the team. It was not going to be
doesn't-
pretty.
This is who we want for president? Like, come on.
No, he owes two people too much money, and he loves Putin. How about that? That should be a disqualifier right there.
So all NATO countries would say, "Sorry, sir, you're not welcome here."
Because he swears people call him sir. You know, the divine
Yeah,
has
he
never
does.
put,
He decided that.
the
Yeah.
divine never puts me in a position to meet these people. There's a reason why. Because if I saw that dude with his long tie, I would probably say something real disrespectful.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah,
well,
Dana,
long
and I
as
don't
it's
think you'd hold
true.
back. Yeah.
No. Oh
No,
my God.
no.
All right.
Well,
But-
Hey, I want to talk about. Sorry, Dana Black. I want to talk about that one quick thing that the Indiana Department of Education sat down this week on the 14th, and that was kind of an interesting
Oh, yes, of
situation.
course.
So, the department, or the ISTA, which is the Indiana State Teachers Association, their president Keith Gamble put out a note that said the incorporation of educator input into this new draft is a significant step forward, demonstrating that the voices of educators and community members have been heard and valued. Thank you, Keith. But thank you for everybody getting involved and
Yes.
saying something so they could even make that decision.
Yes,
Yep.
citizen government, baby. Get
Yeah.
involved.
So I wanted to bring that up because that was a hot one. Yes.
Can you tell us?
I think-
Can you give us like the before and after so that people understand where we are? Like we're talking about those diplomas that universities said that they wouldn't be able to get into those universities with those diplomas. So what kind of give us an idea of what those changes were?
So they talked about key improvements included an enhanced academic rigor and a commitment to addressing access and equity concerns, which were washed away in that previous plan that the Indiana Department of Education brought forward. Well, and of course, he goes on to Keith says, while there's always room for improvement and refinements, the ISTA is pleased with the progress made. We'll continue to work collaboratively with the Indiana Department of Education to get through this and make sure that no matter your background or your zip code, you're taken care of in this. And that's key to it right there, too.
Absolutely.
You didn't have if they did a 3-hour meeting, you didn't have but one person speaking against it. Everybody that stood up said, don't do this, don't do this. I mean, spoke for it. There'd only be one person, and 38 people from different communities all over the state were coming to say, don't, this is not good. And they listened. I was amazed by that.
It's
I
impressive.
will say it's impressive. I will say there was over 8,000 comments put forth. All the stakeholders stepped up. And, this should have happened before in the first place.
Yeah.
But I will say, so the major switch is, just so people know, that the GPS and the GPS Plus diplomas that we used to operate under are gone. They are scrapped. They're gone. What they're introducing is called the new Indiana diploma, which has 3 buckets or 3 prongs. Enrollment, which is somebody, if you're on the track, if you want to go to higher learning after college, after high school, if you want to go on to college. Employment, or listed. Now, while these changes are great, they listened to the community, there was a lot of concerns, there's still some caution because we still need to go to round 2 to follow this, because there's some things that we need to be thinking about and still pressing our legislators on to answer these questions. 1, funding. How are they going to fund these changes? 2, the way they have it laid out, it's really pushing and asking 8th graders to make a choice in 8th grade, which track you want to go on.
Yeah, you have to have that done that summer. Yeah, before 9th grade. Yeah.
And that, or no, in 8th grade.
Oh,
So
during
that-
8th grade. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of a hard thing to do for a young adult, a middle schooler. You're still a young adolescent. That's a big choice.
Yeah.
The other thing is we talked about, which we'll talk about more today, is because of one of the middle tracks under the employment, the requirements to get X amount of hours in the workforce for work assignments. Who's monitoring that? Where's the safety? Where's the transportation for some of these rural students who
Yeah.
don't have transportation to fulfill these requirements? Are they
Yes.
going to give money to these local schools so that we can do this? And there's two more points I want to bring up. These career scholarship accounts, who's monitoring them? Because last time there were 574 applicants to get into some job placement where they only placed 40 students, 40%. So there's some gaps here. And finally, Chris Campbell, kudos to her, who stepped up at this conversation, said, we are going into a budget year. We have already allocated $1 billion to voucher programs. And a lot of the dollars that we put towards education in the last cycle came from the American Rescue Plan. Where's the money coming to fund this?
Especially now that they're cutting property taxes. Everybody's
Right.
cutting property taxes.
So who you vote for this year in a budget year in this big educational
key.
decision is going to be key. This is not over. While they were, Mark, you pointed out, and some great improvements, and we need to keep speaking up. And if
Right.
your representative or state senator is not holding town meetings, shame on them. You need to hold them accountable.
They're not going to do that. Are you kidding me? Talk to the people? What?
There is no, that's the last 10 years. I've never seen anybody run from town halls or hanging out with constituents. The only ones they go visit with are the friendlies at some, paid for event. Hey, you $100 a plate or whatever they're doing as a fundraiser. They don't come talk to constituents. Where did that go? Why?
Man, I don't know.
Afraid.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And see, in Indianapolis down here, because we have so many representatives and most of them are Black, let's just put it out there, they're
Right.
everywhere. I see them
Yes.
everywhere because
At
we're
all events.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
rocking at the same, events and same community. I never saw Susan Brooks when I was in District 5. I never saw,
Good point.
and
Good
then
point. Yeah.
she would have her town halls in a closet and one person at a time come and talk to her.
10 a.m.
That's
on a
not
Tuesday.
a town hall. That's a
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
Yeah.
Congressman Carson is everywhere. And he's
Right.
got his daughter in tow. Like, he goes and he sits down, he will sit down and talk to you. Obviously he's got to have his security, things like that, but at least he's there. He's not afraid to show up. And I imagine Frank Mervan is the same way. I'm just not in District 1.
Yeah. I mean, when Roy had a question about, because he's on green card status, he went to Frank Mervan, even though we're in CD2, he was on it like that, and that
Wow.
shouldn't happen. I shouldn't have
Right.
to go to another congressperson to help out with an issue that comes up or a question that needs to be answered.
Right.
It's like, where's Waldo? This
Right.
is the thing for a lot of
Right, exactly.
So
I mean,
true. So-
some of these candidates who are running in some of these congressional districts, you don't even see them. Like District 4, who's the person elected in District 4? What is their name? And are they campaigning?
Right.
District 8, District 9?
Yeah.
It's bad. I do know where Jefferson Shreve is. He's spending a lot of money.
Ching, ching, ching.
Yeah.
He's buying his congressional seat.
Ugh, that's not happening.
Done before. That's the track he's following.
I mean, he's just got money to burn. I wish I had like money just to throw away like that. He's not even being strategic. He's just throwing it out there.
Just
All right.
putting it out there. All right.
All right. What's next? What
What's
else?
next is, well, this week we're going to talk about labor and
Yeah.
Project 2025, because that's a thread that throws deep into Project 2025. But I wanted to, talk about, before we kind of dive into that I really, really want to call to action in the middle of this conversation, is to really start, when you see things on social media this week, when you see things out there in the general public, we have to start calling the deliberate lies to manipulate the agenda of our communities, because that's what's holding us back, is people are believing these lies and disinformation. And you have to ask yourself, why are they doing that? They're using it to make us feel like, to create this us against them, to create this polarization. And when going back to our beginning of our conversation, that intimidates people for wanting to run to office or enter the discourse. And I think if we go back and start grounding ourselves with facts, then we can come to the conversation with a little more sense of civility.
Well, labor, Mark, is your wheelhouse. Before we dive all the way in there, What were your thoughts on the Teamster being at the Republican
Good question. Yeah.
National
Well,
Convention?
so he understands his constituency. He's got a group, just like all labor unions do, of folks within that are still saying, I've always been a Republican. My family's a Republican. I'm going to do this. I personally don't know why he went and spoke on Monday night in Milwaukee to do that. That was a huge thing. He's been having his shin kicked a lot from his own constituents within the Teamsters, but labor leaders elsewhere. I've listened to multiple different AFL-CIO represented Communication Workers of America, UAW leaders who are asked, well, what did you think about Sean O'Brien doing that? Well, Sean O'Brien probably should have taken that step. And they've consistently said, we don't agree with that. We wouldn't go there. And he is, as Sean Fain from the UAW has said multiple times, Trump is a scab. So why are you with him?
Mm-hmm.
But they do it because their constituency within that group decided, hey, we give to the Republicans. We're going to do this. We want to make donations. And they actually donated the same amount of money to the Republican Party as they did to the Democrats. They want to try and make it a 50-50. So they're playing the middle to both ends. It doesn't make sense to me politically. Pick a side and stay with it. That's why I say tip of the hat to these other labor unions who've already jumped in and said, look, Kamala Harris, we're with her. We're going there. They had conversation a little bit. Some of them didn't jump in right away that first week, but by the second and third week, we weren't even at convention yet.
Yeah.
And they were already on board with it. So I think strategically it's going against him because right now there's a huge movement for their next convention to find some people who are saying, oh, really? You're going to do that? I'm running against you.
Wow.
And so there's guys that are coming forward now, have a slate of candidates who are saying, we're not listening to that. It's us with the Democrats, the party that's going to listen to us, take care of us, because there's one key thing the Teamsters are missing in this, the Butch-Lewis Act. People go, what? That salvaged pensions for almost 900,000 people, huge in the Boston area. There's 200,000 people in the Boston area alone who had their pensions saved when that passed. Who did that? Democrats in the House and the Senate made that happen.
Wow.
That's where it's all based at. And the Teamsters lost sight of all that. Oh, that doesn't matter. It matters to the rural driver that's the son of my neighbor here. He talks about it endlessly. He says, that's why I'm a Teamster. I got that pension. That's why I did this for all these years. And that thing helped pay it off. And that's to make sure I've got my pension like I need it. And people are missing those things. So his thinking on it, no one's been able to get that from him. He kind of avoids the topic right now because it's like he realizes once he was committed, he was all in. I don't understand. He didn't back up. I don't know why he didn't.
Yeah.
I was wondering too of him and Wayne Mark, the from Oklahoma, who wanted to throw it down with him on the floor of a Senate meeting there. Why, if they crossed paths when they were at the Democratic or the Republican National Convention, I was hoping they did not because a UFC fight is what they wanted to bring to each other. Anyways,
I had to ask because I hadn't really had a chance to talk to you about it.
That's a little background. I could go deeper, but that's the top of it for sure.
That's good. You make good points. So it's never too late to do the right thing, and he should have backed out. I am a former Teamster. I'm in a union now. I'm in the campaign workers union right now. But I used to be a Teamster when I worked at Pepsi years ago. And I just remember how we stood together to get things done for the people.
Right.
In fact, when I was working at Pepsi, they actually didn't want me to be a union steward because I could actually think.
Yeah, you were too much.
I used to challenge them on their own policies or, our safety. Like they would, I'll never forget. They were chastising us. We were forklift drivers, and they were chastising us about safety. And I asked the question, well, we've got leaks and so pools of water are coming down on the floor. And if you've ever driven a forklift, it's not like they got tread, right?
Right.
What are you guys doing to fix that? And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? Well, you telling us we need to be safe. You are creating an unsafe environment. And they were done with me after that. Just for asking one question.
I know that's, and as you should. I think anybody has a leadership position, no matter what it is, if you're a teachers union, you're a manufacturing union, when a member comes to you with something, give them an answer. Tell them, what are you going to do for them? Listen to what they have. What seems to happen with a lot of leaders is they stop listening.
Yeah.
And that's your failure right there. You have to understand your constituency and say, you know what, sister, you do have a great point. I'm going to look into that. I think that's great. Instead of saying, knock it off. You ask some hard questions and we're done with you.
Yeah.
What does that do? You're not solving it because there's so many people, plenty of people who aren't the ones the genius level, but there's some people who got some great ideas, but if you don't ask or don't engage, you'll never know.
And there's a lot of people with just good common sense, Right? You ain't got to be a
Thank you.
genius to have common sense. You can
You
see
might
when
have
some.
missed that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Well, let's talk about this,
Yeah.
you guys, because there's four entities that they're really going to hammer in and take out our and really anti-union 100%.
Yeah.
Is in this Project 2025, page 14, allow states to ban labor unions.
Man.
Yeah.
Okay?
Let's just
Every-
stop there. Let's just let's
Right to
let's,
work.
let's
There's a
stop
lot to
there.
dive into.
Let's stop there. The idea that states can ban collective bargaining. They want that to be a thing. Again, I keep trying to tell y'all I have DNA trauma whenever I hear states' rights. But to say that you can ban, eliminate, ban the ability of working people to come together in a state to fight for what's right. That is just insane.
Well, you have to go understand why they're doing this, right? Because there's three buckets that kind of umbrella all this, right? The financial impact, right? Because they want to give more money to the corporations and not allow the workers to that. We can dive into that more. There's a civil rights component to this. Ageism, sexism, harassment
Equality,
charges, equality. Okay. And then they also, this religious element keeps coming in where they can give privileged bosses the right to have this religious entity. They want that in the workplace. So in other words, if you don't align with the religion of the person who you're reporting to, they can fire you over that.
Right.
That's crazy.
And you have no protections. And
Right.
one of the things they brought forward was the employee involvement organizations, or as we call it, the EIOs. So old McDonald, you can EIO this. I don't want to hear that. That's their watered down version, because what that does for them, it'll weaken the influence of maybe in this case teachers unions and lead to less collective bargaining power. And that's what they want. They want to say, okay, you're the leader because you're the one that kisses our shoes all the time. So we're going to make sure you lead, and I need you to rat out all those people who even bring up union.
Yeah.
Well, we have to call out, there's in there. The second piece is, which goes to teachers unions, ban all public employee unions. Teachers
Correct.
are technically public employees because
Yes,
they're
they are.
funded by the state. Bye-bye teachers unions.
And we've seen that already take place in Indiana. Mitch Daniels was the first person. Again, Indiana is ground zero for Project 2025. So when Mitch Daniels was governor some 2 decades ago, right, he literally banned public workers, not teachers, but public workers from, he said, I'm not negotiating with your unions. I'm not, and he did away with. So it's already been done in Indiana. So what if they?
We had it. Yeah, we had collective bargaining for state employees.
Yeah,
wiped it out.
Well,
Got rid of it.
I don't think people realize. When I was diving into this, the protections under when you have the union, you mentioned collective bargaining. What this Project 2025 would eliminate was, in some entities, when you go and do your collective bargaining, it eliminates the law that allows you to start your bargaining at where you are at currently for your pay structure. So in layman's terms, if you go to the bargaining table, if your team is getting $25.50 an hour, that's your bargaining starting point. What they're saying is, nope, they can start at 10 cents an hour and now begin bargaining. Welcome to the real world.
Right.
That's
That's what
Hang you out to dry and hope they can block you or lock you out.
What happened in the past will be eliminated, and any new bargaining is you have to start from scratch.
That's crazy.
Every 2, 3, 4 years, whenever you're negotiating, whatever your length of agreement is, that's nuts.
That's
Okay,
crazy.
You'll never get anything done. You'll always be in constant negotiation.
Yeah.
And never gain.
Yeah.
And they and you know what though? It's also more. Pay is one thing that you're bargaining, you're negotiating, but it's also the benefits. It's also work-life balance. If you have to start over again, say you guys we have unlimited days off. What if we have to start with, okay, no, you only have a week off. Now let's start. Wait, whoa.
Yeah. Right. Well, let's talk about overtime. Let's say
That's the next thing here.
how about if I put in 52 hours every week because I give a little bit every day and that ends up being 52 hours at the end of the week. Yeah, well, you get 40 for this amount and you get the other hours, the other 12 for this amount. It's the same thing. They don't want you to have a time and a half or double time.
Yep. Well, that's the third piece. It would let states opt out of national overtime protections and minimum wage laws. I can say as I was working across the country for Lululemon and opening stores around the country, and when you have 2 weeks to go to open up a store when everything's in place, a delivery truck is going to be late. Okay. And you've got your team working at night, jamming the music, ordering pizza. They're on overtime. I'm going to pay them. But according to these laws, you could work until midnight and not be paid.
Right.
That's
right. Absolutely.
I don't
Ridiculous.
Or
understand.
they do the old, they'd replace it. Say, you know what? I need you to work to midnight and I'll give you Friday off. And then Thursday, some big thing happens. I got to have you working Friday.
Gotta
But
come
I already
full
planned to have a
routine,
3-day
yeah.
weekend. Yeah.
Yep.
You'll never get it returned. Yeah.
And
And then here, go ahead, Dana.
no, I was gonna say, and this what's so crazy is like they're literally taking us back to before we had labor laws, and
Yes.
when the union busting was all about harassing and threatening people who wanted to organize. They literally are taking us back to the 1920s and 1919s when labor unions wasn't a thing, right?
Right. Yep. And
Go ahead, Mary.
we totally have heard, and we keep saying this, and the fourth entity of this, and then we can dive in deeper on this one, is eliminate child labor rules that protect children from working in hardest conditions, mines, meat packing. What happened in Indiana in the general session in 2023, the last session? We stepped backwards with our child labor protections. Again, we are ground zero. They are already putting some of these things in place so they can slide in and dismantle the rest of it.
Do you guys remember the story of the immigrant 12-year-old that was working in a meat packing plant and he died? He ended up getting crushed. That life can never come back. And there's a reason why we have labor laws and child labor laws.
Right.
But these clowns, right, don't care if you lose a limb, don't care if you are permanently injured for the rest of your life. I mean, what kind of I just don't understand these people with the idea that people shouldn't have a good quality of life. You don't put a 14, 12-year-old in a meat packing plant.
No.
No, and they were bringing them in sometimes too to clean machinery that they know nothing about. They don't understand a lockout procedure, which you would lock everything out so that it couldn't activate and run while you're in there cleaning it, type of thing. So there's been some major injuries that the Department of Labor's come in and investigated. But what have they worked on for the last 50 years to make sure there's less people to investigate that on a state level and on a federal level
The
too? And
agency.
this is their fever dream. They want to wipe this whole thing out. I mean, I'd go back to listen to Eric Loomis, who's a political or a union activist with a long history. He mentioned this week on a podcast I listened to that Project 2025 wants to eliminate the union movement in this country and replace it with those fake organizations that do nothing but serve as a place for the company to put its favorite employees to report on workers who might be complaining in order to be able to fire those workers. Wow. And when he said that, I was like, I got to have that quote. That's amazing. But that's exactly where they want to go. They want to take it, just like you're talking about, Dana. Whoa, those good old days back in 1908 when everybody had to fight, and oh, you got dead at work. Good for you.
Yeah. I just don't understand it. And what's so crazy is when we talk about these things and the desire to bust unions, which Indiana, with the right to work law that we have, we're a right to work state, which means you're a right to work for less.
Yes.
We don't see the correlation between how corporate greed is preventing many of us from advancing financially, career-wise, or some of the goals that we have. We don't see how these things are literally negatively impacting us as we try to move forward. And that's what's frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we fought for rights, and let's talk about it. People have died. I mean, you talk about that shirtwaist fire situation in New York, where the elevated ladders from the fire trucks couldn't reach the top floors of this building. They'd locked the workers in. Fire erupts. The women had to jump. 100 of them, over 100 people slapped onto the floor in the streets and died because they had no other option: burn alive to your death or jump.
You know what that brings up to me, and I'm gonna call this out here, and I can, and I even mentioned it to Roy, is the world outside knows that. They know the fire safety standards. They know the length of these ladders, these insurance companies. You know why they know this? I remember when Roy and I started dating, and he's an executive, and my ex-husband had this kind of insurance too with his level at State Street Bank. We were checking in a hotel. He was at a business thing, and I had tagged along. And when you're an executive at a hotel, because they know these things, so this is what I mean, they protect themselves, is you're not allowed to stay above the 7th floor in a hotel.
I've heard this before. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know why?
I learned it in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Do you know why, Dana?
I have no idea.
A lot of these executives will have insurance on themselves. Insurance won't cover them if they're above the 7th floor because they know the ladders don't reach that far.
Oh, that's wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it
they
was
know
actually,
these things. They
yeah,
know these things. So there's ways to protect everybody,
yeah.
is my point.
And I
Wow.
learned it from the industry. I learned it from a guy who was a concierge who I've known for years, and he was able to tell me some stuff in his retirement now. Like, my goodness. And he said that that was the snootiest people were the richest people. He
Yeah.
said
Mhm.
they've dropped all moral compass in any way. He said 100%. I can't
Yeah.
not tell you. I found one rich person who was nice. He said the easiest going guy was the Liuna guy who does traffic with a sign, stop, go on the
Yeah.
street out there. That was a hardworking union guy. Those guys were salt of the earth people who were the ones who got it done and took care of me as a concierge. That's who I want to take care of. It's,
I would like, I'll be honest. I would like to see, the UAW. What's his name? Fine.
yeah, Sean Fain.
Sean Fain.
Sun-
Sean Fain. I believe that if he called for it, there would be like a national strike.
Well,
Because
he has May Day of 28. That is
oh,
it. We're trying to align agreements right now,
May?
and that's what he did. May Day, because that's a worldwide thing. Americans are so insulated because they gave us Labor Day in September like that. Wonderful. Let's take that holiday. That's important. But what they did was they took it away from the world. Always revolves around Labor Day is May 1st around the globe, except for the United States. And they don't want to talk about it because they don't want this world coming together. Well, now that
mm,
you've got TikTok, you're talking to someone in Australia, you're talking to someone in
Ah,
New Guinea, you're talking to someone in Belgium. Those things are all, there's no borders anymore. So now people are even talking more about it. Sean Fain put that forward, and that's where this Project 2025 really brings it to the surface, saying we don't want labor having these kinds of powers. We don't want working people to have any say in what we do. We'll tell them what they make, what they're going to receive in benefits, and how many hours they're going to work. That's not something we want to negotiate. That's where we're at. This is why it's happening right now. His stand-up strike, which was unheard of. The UAW had walked hand in hand. I'm sorry, I'm going to go on a little soapbox here,
please.
but they had walked hand in hand with the auto manufacturers for a year. That's our main plate of food we eat from here because it's growing. The UAW is growing in numbers in academic, which is another story altogether. But within manufacturing, they have aligned those agreements for Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors to be on the 1st of May 2028, and he's calling for a national strike. It's the same thing he did with the stand-up strike. He told them, we're going to strike you, Stellantis, Chrysler. Well, what plant are you going to shut down? You'll know when we do it. And
Well,
he would go on Facebook Live and announce it at 9 at night, 10 in the morning on this day, because he gave them a chance right up to the window saying, look, I'm going to go on the air in another hour. Either you're going to help us here or we're going to strike a plant. Well, what plant are you going to strike? You'll find out in an hour. Just
wow.
killed them. And that plant, all these plants were ready to go when that hammer came down, when he said those words.
yeah.
It was a tactic that wasn't used, hadn't been used. I mean, I expected it to work, and it worked better than I thought it would. But it goes on the heels of what Sean O'Brien and everybody in the Teamsters had done with their practice strikes. They were out there for months at a time prior to their agreement in the summer of 23, saying, hey, look, we started in March, we started in April, we started in May, we're out here. This is what a strike's going to look like to you guys. So when you were off work, you went back and stood there with a sign for your bosses to see outside what that would be. People with their family there, drinking a bottle of water, making sure everybody heard about it, spend 3 hours out there in what was a practice picket, getting ready to show the country what it was going to be like. Guess what? It never had to happen. They put something together for everybody. So, I mean, there's ways to get this done, but that is something that's going to happen. It's a hot item. And this is what Project 2025, Agenda 47, call it what you will, but Heritage is totally against American workers having any kind of say like this, no
And
matter what job they do.
and it's
Yeah.
crazy the idea that you think that you're able to make all this fortune without workers. You're not making these. So why wouldn't you want to take care of the people that are taking care of you?
Our
Well,
labor created that
yeah.
profit.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing that, Starbucks is unionizing. There's these there's other companies that people are coming together. There's been an uptick in folks organizing.
Yep.
And doing this deep dive here to better understand what's going on that there, I noticed that there's boutique law firms out there
Yeah.
that are actually hired to help corporations not unionize.
Union busters, as we call them. Yeah,
As you
absolutely.
would, and I was really
Yeah.
diving into that, and I was like, wow, because obviously having worked in corporate America, I've had this opportunity, unfortunate that I have to let someone go, but in the current structure, when you let somebody go, you have to have a sit down, you have to have a warning, you have to show
Mhm.
a track record, give an opportunity for improvement. All that would be gone. You can just get fired
On a whim.
on a whim for whatever you You say something the wrong way to a coworker, you're out of here.
Yeah.
That behavior will perpetuate and keep going on. Your job security is not
Yeah.
there. And when you
Right.
have a family, not knowing where your paycheck is going to be cut the next day, you keep quiet, and then you have to put up with these conditions. As Dana says, we're going back to the 1920s and 30s.
Yeah.
And again, Indiana is an at-will state.
Right.
Means so even so with the union protections, at least you have to follow these rules before they let you go. In Indiana, if they could literally say, Dana, you're a lesbian, you're fired.
Yep.
Because gay people aren't protected. We're not a protected class when it comes to work.
That's part of the civil rights entity.
Yeah. So the laws in Indiana are set up so that as a worker, you have no protections unless you are under a bargaining agreement.
Yep.
And then that's sketchy. They're going to find loopholes to that.
Oh, God, yeah.
And those boutique law firms you talk about are the ones that help them through that. So they bring someone down and they take off their suit and tie. They put on a T-shirt and jeans and scuffed up boots and go hang out on the floor of the plant and talk to those people and say, what are you talking about? You need a union. Golly, tell me why you think that. You don't need that. We're going to take care of you. We're a family here. Classic lines.
Classic. And
I
go ahead.
just get so upset, Dana, because you bring up some really good points. It's a theme we've been talking about, is this racism and sexism and the ability to get away with behaviors that we were moving forward with.
Right.
We were both, that we were trying to eliminate. And now you're giving a permission structure to go backwards and allow this type of behavior to continue.
Right.
Well,
And these
again,
people died for this.
Yeah.
People died for the right to do this, and we're going to just wipe that away?
and that's what they want. Again, mediocre white men, not
Right.
exceptional white men like you, Mark, exceptional. Mediocre white men don't have to compete, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to
Right.
compete. They want to go back to when they didn't have to actually compete for a job, right?
Yeah.
They didn't.
Correct.
Now, to be fair, a lot of people, one of the things that I always would get from people who don't actually understand history, and Mary, you as a history teacher, you'll get
Yes.
this. They always want to talk about what organizations or what industries or what spaces were racist in the beginning. Like there were times when the labor unions weren't as accepting to people of color, and that we as Black people should denounce unions
Turn
because
against them.
when they started, they were racist. So I like to remind people, I almost said something bad. I like to remind people America started off racist. So should I abandon it too?
Right.
I mean, literally, they came in with their smallpox blankets, right? And eliminated the indigenous people and then relegated them to reservations. They imported humans from Africa to do the labor that they could not do or didn't want to do. So America started off racist. So should I abandon that too? Or better
that's a
yet,
history we don't want to teach. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like it drives me nuts because I've heard people say same thing with Planned Parenthood. They would tell us, as Black people, you shouldn't be down with these organizations because of their origin. But am I supposed to leave America now? Am I supposed to give up on America? So no, things evolve and things change. And the union now is the great equalizer.
Correct.
For race, gender, all the things, because everybody under the collective bargaining gets the same thing. We're all equal, or you know what I'm saying? So all these, I just had to throw that out there. Mary, since you brought that up, because it's like people forget.
We need to talk about it. And the great equalizer, as women, sorry, Mark, I'm gonna leave you out.
No, you're gonna. I know your point's gonna be good.
The bargaining table, I don't know how many women out there get frustrated. I say this to young people when they're getting their first salary offer, you need to counter offer because you are getting offered less than the male counterpart. That's the reality. I don't want anybody to be shade for that, but that is the truth.
It's the truth.
It's the truth. When you look it up, right? According to the American Association of University Women, in terms of the current trends where women are, we need to keep working, and we are not going to see equity in pay till 2059.
Child.
Yes.
You
and
take
every
out the
year,
bargaining.
Yes. And every year you're working till at least April. So a quarter of the year you are not equal in pay.
There you go. And you know what? I got to give the shout out to my girls. The U.S. women's soccer team just won the World Cup. We
Olympics.
Olympics.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yes.
Olympics. Yep. But the World Cup is still entrenched in my Right, in Vancouver. So anyway, the Olympics, yes, I was stressed all morning watching the game. They pulled it off, but have to give hats off to that team because they brought attention to equal pay in that sports arena where they were doing the work, winning the medals, earning the rights to various television entities, and everybody else was making money off them, but they were not getting paid what the men were getting paid. How many medals have they won? Oh,
I mean, most times the men's team would never even make the World Cup. They wouldn't even make
the
it.
Olympics.
Right.
I think they made it out of the first
They were eliminated quickly,
they were
unfortunately. Yeah.
the Olympics this year. They did make it out of the first round, the initial the group stages. Hats off to them. They're getting better, but it was like a long time coming. But yet they were getting way more pay for each one of their appearances.
And
it's how they're treated too.
Yeah.
And it's parity. We just want parity. It's not asking for the world. Yeah.
Can we go back to the WTA and Billie Jean King and everybody for $1 was a part of it? And then even still, it took Venus Williams to continue to push for pay equity at Grand Slams. But again, you know. Yeah, we can talk about that all day long. I don't.
Right. Well, it's in an Olympic situation. It's how they move them from place to place, how they treat them, where they live, where they train. Those things are not equal, men's and women's. Whether it's hockey or it's soccer, it doesn't matter.
Or NCAA, mind you.
Absolutely.
Remember, I know that they're not union, but they are now able to get paid. There was like a split screen of what the men's basketball tournament got and what the women got, and it was like, are you serious? A bologna sandwich?
Right.
But you got to remember, we were watching, and there was more revenue coming in watching the women's games. They outwatched, they outperformed, they brought in revenue, but we're not going to pay them for that.
Yeah.
Same thing with the women's soccer team.
And this last NCAA tournament, name the most popular male player that was in the tournament. Name me one.
Caitlin Clark.
Oh, no, that would be the females.
I know that's where I go.
You know, that was the whole point. That was the whole point. Like, but being in a union allows everybody that's under that agreement to receive the same amount of money, the same amount of time off, the same holidays, whatever. We're all, and the fact that these people don't want everyone to have an opportunity to be better. Yeah. Like that's just greedy, because how many trillions of dollars can you spend in a lifetime?
Yeah, let's get real. Yeah. What was it last week? We were talking about the environment, and we were talking about this is tied into, I found it really interesting when I found this out too. Of course, good old Florida and Texas are leading the charge of this. 10 state attorney generals, and you can assume that our attorney general was involved in this, that they were put petition to OSHA to implement a national extreme heat emergency standard. What does that mean? It's basically workers who are working, and because of climate change, the workers that are working outside, it's just like in sports. Let's go back to sports. We saw it when they were playing the Olympics. When you play 30 minutes, even though it's a 45-minute half, when it gets to a certain heat temperature, you have to stop the game and give them water breaks, okay? Mm-hmm. It's safety. You put your players, they're working, you have to put them first. What these attorney generals are doing is saying, no. If the temperature raises to X amount outside and your time outside, you still have to keep going. Well, what was happening is you've got people who were actually dying outside in these extremes. We had the hottest summer going on record so far. Right. In Florida and Texas, seriously, in Florida and Texas, they've made it illegal for local cities to protect their workers from direct effects of climate change. Apparently, being woke includes abusing your workers and letting them die of heat exhamption.
Right. Jeez. Yeah. I thank you for tying it to woke.
I mean, I never understood why were they so offended about woke. You know what that is, right? They find
just today's version of the N-word.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I'm glad I didn't have to say it, and that my white brother
let the white
understands.
guy say it. Yeah? I'm telling you. I've just a black friend of mine retired after 40 years, and when he was leaving, he said one thing to me. Fist bumps me. He goes, "Great working with you. Stay woke."
That's it. I mean, because what's the opposite of woke?
I was like, thank you.
What is the opposite of woke? And then I think Ron DeSantis has shown us what could happen if we weaponize what it is to be woke. Florida, I mean, granted, Indiana has some of the same horrible laws on the book. We just don't get the same national attention that Florida does because it's a great destination spot. But literally, all of these things that they are trying to teach us or tell us ain't real, right? Mm-hmm. So why would you not? Being asleep is a bad idea.
Right. But you
Yeah.
know what? I don't understand this. Like they're basically saying that in a heat wave, if you're working outside, you can't take breaks, you can't have a water break, you can't have some of these manufacturing plants are not air conditioned, folks.
Correct.
Right?
I was just going to bring that up. Just like working in a field, picking all those vegetables, they're under the
Hmm.
direct sunlight all day long.
Right. And they're not air conditioned. You've got the
Yeah.
machines running, creating astronomical amount of generating heat on top of the natural heat that's coming into the building. And you're saying you can't have another break because of the rise in temperature? I mean, come on.
Well, what does it sound like, y'all? I mean, how many breaks did they get when they was picking cotton?
They didn't.
They
The break you
didn't.
got was at sundown.
So that's what they really want. They really want
Seriously.
free labor. That's what they really
Yeah.
want.
Right.
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 Which is why they would do away with a minimum wage, because once
Right.
they do that federally, once you get rid of the Department of Education, obviously, as we've talked about that, there's that attack on the labor unions there. But you also want to get rid of environmental protections that we have for consumers and the people. You'd have another Love Canal. You'll have another, you just name any other things that have happened in this country. We don't do away with all those things. And you're going to do away with the safety standards on
Mhm.
work sites because they're putting undue pressure and cost on the manufacturers of whatever. That's
Mhm.
their whole view of it is, oh, you're stopping them from making money. What?
Huh? And
Yeah.
if you are in business and you can't budget safety, then you shouldn't be in business.
No, you shouldn't. Mark, I've got this really big question that I want to talk about as we switch the conversation. So we've already outlined that they're going to allow states to ban labor unions, ban all public employee unions,
Mhm.
let states opt out of overtime pay, minimum wage,
Mhm.
all that, eliminate child labor laws. But we still have a large amount of the labor union membership and folks in the labor organization and working in these factories and manufacturing supporting Trump.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. I think we really need to talk about that. When you outline what we just talked about,
Right.
it doesn't make sense to follow somebody like Trump who has been lying about his protections for labor folks, who's been lying. He's never been on a picket line. He
Yep.
brought those folks and talked to them in front of the manufacturing, the car plant. Those were not labor folks. Those were not
They were
union.
paid actors.
They
Yeah.
were paid actors. So again, the lying, the disinformation. Talk to us. Let's dive into this conversation of why are these folks part of, that workforce supporting Trump?
My sample size is small, but I've taken this conversation over the last decade to really try and find this out because it just stumped me in 14 and 15. People who I thought had their head in the game were all of a sudden wearing Trump hats.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they hated Hillary. They hated Hillary. And I started talking about it from a misogynist perspective, saying, well, you just don't like a woman. Well, she can't be trusted. I said, she's Secretary of State. What are you talking about? She's been all these places, didn't want to hear a single accomplishment she had. It is the rhetoric that was started by Rush Limbaugh. So
Mm-hmm.
these are the grown-up people who listen to hate radio. They don't have to read. They don't have to delve into it further. They don't have to try and say, hey, let's find out what else is in this story. Because someone spits it out to them. Follow that with he gets off the air and Glenn Beck comes on and he talks for another 4 hours about it too. Name whoever it is, some right-wing radio person or TV personality. Obviously, Fox in the last, 25 years or so that they've been around to really push this stuff. Those are the people who they suck in. It's easy because there's no thinking involved. They tell you what to think. So it's no critical thinking. Again, goes back to them dismantling education. So then I go to this aggrieved white male because predominantly it's white men. If you see somebody holding up a sign that says blacks for Trump, there's another paid actor. Thank you very much. And I'm not going to stop them for being opportunistic to make a couple $100 that day they couldn't have made anywhere else. And I've always wondered, do you get paid? Did you actually get paid? Did someone actually get you a check finally? I would wonder that if you're going to work for Trump, Trump's all about dissing everybody and not paying anybody. But my point is, it goes back to those people who don't have to apply critical thinking in any way. And it's that aggrieved male who's like, I think that there's someone coming across the border and they're going to get free education in college. They're going to get free food and they get a Visa card. That's what they think Visa is. I'm
Yeah.
here to get a Visa. Oh, it's a Visa card. Oh my gosh. So even Trump talks like that too. So it's a deficiency in information, but they
Mhm.
just don't seek it out. It's just too easy for them. They just take the easiest road.
And a lot of and what's so crazy about that, as you describe it that way, a lot of the people that the Rush Limbaughs and the Trumps talk about, the folks don't even spend any time with them. They don't know. They're not in Black communities. They don't go to Black or Latino communities. So they don't even know these people. They're just strange oddities that they keep being told or are taking something that was theirs, which, by the way, is so not true. Like, come on. Like, white people, y'all own every damn thing. What?
Right.
Make it make sense when you own everything, but you worried about somebody taking something from you. You own everything.
You already own it. You've had
argument. You know, that's the immigration. Be afraid of the immigrant coming. They're taking your job. It goes back to what we were talking about, the whole racism, us against them. They're going to come and take your jobs. When did Fox News switch? I don't know what year it was, but no longer do they do news, they do themes.
Yeah.
So all night they talk about the theme, which is immigrants, or all night we're going to talk about the theme of inflation, which is not correct the way they pose it. But
but look at that. Those themes are tied to the talking points the GOP has consistently put out. So as you see it on Monday, then they're talking about it on TV. There's a paper trail that follows along with that. This is what we're regurgitating. They've put this underground network together that makes sure all these activists are speaking the same story over and over again.
Right. And you have to, and it goes back to the lawsuit too. You wonder why, everybody always wonders, why does Fox get away with all this disinformation? Well, the news that you see, that too. But when you look online or you look at the lawsuits, the reason why they can get away with this, they couldn't get away with because it went too far with the election denial, was it's not Fox News. They're registered as Fox News Entertainment.
Correct. They were
Let me say that again.
Yeah.
Fox News Entertainment. So that doesn't allow them to come under the ethical norms that you would expect for a news agency.
Well, but see, that is so nuanced that the people that are listening to them, they don't get that.
Exactly.
They don't get
exactly. They just look at Fox News because that's what they put out there.
Right.
As a result, we're creating this, again, goes back to disinformation. We have to start calling it out.
Yes.
Well, in
Thank you for
2012,
bringing it up.
in 2012, they put the numbers out that people who listen to Fox News were less informed than people who listen to no news at all.
Right. Yeah.
All right. I mean, that was in 2012.
Yeah, and they've been still making that choice for 20 years now.
Exactly. And I don't know. I know that in 2016 when I was running, I would go to union places to speak, and it would just drive me nuts when I would see all of the Trump signs in 2016. And here I was. I'm a child of labor. My father was in the union, and we had a great middle class life. I wasn't. We weren't poor. People sometimes they look at me and think that I came from the hood. I did not. Like my home was paid, that my parents bought a house, right?
Right.
And I remember unions being in lockstep with the Democratic Party and being in lockstep with working people. And so when I was running for office in 2016 and I was showing up to these union places to have these conversations, I was dumbfounded. And this was at the time when Republicans in Indiana were doing everything they could to dismantle collective bargaining. Like this isn't, so like, I'm literally like, okay, so you don't have to like me. You don't have to like me, but please tell me why you are aligning yourself with people who don't want you to be able to do what you're doing right now.
Right. And they're missing that. It's so easy. It's like the diamond is shining in your eye. You probably can't see because it's so bright, but reach out and grab it. Realize that these folks, you have two choices. So what they're really pushing now too, the Republicans are really pushing is making sure a Kennedy or a Jill Stein or a Libertarian X name, whatever here along the way, is there to take votes away from, in this case, Kamala Harris, Biden previously, but that whole play is to make sure there's a third party candidate who can diminish the wins for the Democrats.
I can't even just put that on them though. Like, cause I look at Dr. Cornel West, right?
Bro. I thought he was with us all the way and he jumped off. Like, even Bernie said at this point, I got it. I'm out. I'm done.
Yeah.
Bernie's decided that was something he did in life. He tried, he gave it a shot, but he's realized that's not helping us move things forward. His actions now show he was one of the first senators to come forward and say, I support this ticket. I think by Tuesday, he was already on board with it.
But going back to, it's not always about winning, but look what Bernie Sanders brought to the conversation.
Yes.
A lot of good conversation.
Yes. And he moved the needle. He moved the needle for progressives.
A number of issues.
Yes. Yeah. For progressives. I mean, because a lot of times it's, he wanted to go all the way there, but the incremental changes have,
Right.
you know, gone.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, Bernie was like, I was never a Bernie bro, but
Yeah.
you know, because I
But it brought conversation.
Yes.
It changed your lens, because that's what moves progress forward. Is it's if you don't, you can't just keep a narrow mind of how things should move forward. You have to hear everybody else's stories and experiences that are going to bring us together. So you go, oh, I hear you, I
Yeah.
see, you,"
and it,
and we have to see everybody.
and the fact that it came from Bernie Sanders,
Mm-hmm.
or you know,
Yeah.
is what made it. Because if it had came from Jesse Jackson, it wouldn't have the same effect.
No.
Or if it
Yeah,
came from
true.
because Maxine Waters was saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But it don't have the same effect if it comes from Maxine Waters. The fact that
Right.
Bernie Sanders was saying it, oh, okay, it's acceptable. We can go there now. And I, you know what? And I understand. Like, if you understand the game, play the game the way it's supposed to be played. I
Right.
understand. If I want something to be popular immediately, I'm gonna get the white people to do it. There's
Yeah.
what there's famous, there's like black famous, and then there's famous, right?
Right.
So, and it's okay.
Levels.
Listen, I get it.
Yeah.
That's the way the
Yeah.
game is played. Even when I ran my campaign, when I was learning how to be a candidate, I wanted it to look a certain way so that it could appeal to the masses, right? So
Yeah.
there's certain things that you have to do. I wasn't going to change who I was. I wasn't going to like not wear my ties, but there were still messaging. There was still the way I, would show up in places and the things that I would talk about, because I needed to get those voters. I needed to get the 90% white district that I lived in for them to vote for me. Right. So it's okay.
So true.
If you know the game, play the game. If you
Work
don't,
within it.
unless you are trying to just be disruptive, right?
But you hit the nail on the head, is you have to know the game to play the game so you can use the game.
Absolutely.
There you go. And that's
it's
and
not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad
Yeah.
thing.
Like
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that I went to majority. I didn't recognize what it was at the time, but I went to majority white schools. Like all the black kids that went to my elementary school, we all came from the same neighborhood. Right?
Yeah,
We,
right.
on opposite sides, we all came from the same neighborhood. But I didn't recognize that what I was getting was a life lesson in whiteology.
Oh, there you go.
So true.
Because here
Yeah.
I am hanging out, and it was just normal. Like me, I remember being in a space with my dad, and he's born 1932, Indianapolis, dirt poor. His idea of how you keep white people at a arm's length, but yet you sent me to a school where that's all I'm around. But
He saw the change coming. He knew.
Yeah.
well,
Education, yeah.
yeah, but the cool part about it was I learned how to speak the language in a way that wasn't so I know now how to call somebody a racist without being offensive. Because I know the language. I know how to say it without, them being all offended that a black person said it. There's a way to do it.
That's right.
And that's
Darn
why
right.
we got to keep talking about Project 2025 for our labor people to understand. If you don't wake up and recognize that this thing is so harmful to everything that we have worked so hard for.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
You don't think it's going to come for you right now.
It's
Yeah.
coming.
You
But
don't-
it's coming for you.
It's
It
coming
really
for
is.
you.
Right.
Yeah.
But they put Trump out there as the shiny object in front, and this is all the stuff that's happening behind him. I had a conversation with someone. They said, oh, Biden this, Biden that. I said, stop. This is in the spring of this year. I said, let's look at who they're going to put in charge of the Department of Education, the Department of Motor Vehicles. I don't care what, but some group, they're going to put the proper people who have an understanding of how government works and how it can work
Yeah.
for the people. That's what the Trump administration undid, was take those people out, and they freely admit, hey, we weren't really ready, but this time we'll show you, and they're going to burn it down.
I mean,
in the Steve Bannon language.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. And then, prime example, you said Department of Education. When they put Betsy DeVos
Ugh.
in
Never in a
charge,
classroom in her life.
never in a classroom in her life, and has been a proponent of privatizing public education, and she was in
Right.
charge, they will find somebody much worse than her next time.
She's already on deck. She's already said, I just read an article from Michigan,
He did
and
say
they
she
said,
would
she
take it.
said, I am in. And they
Yeah,
put her on the idea plan of she's part of it because she supports Project 2025 or
Yes, she
Agenda
does.
47.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes back to, we have to, Dana, you mentioned you ran in 2016. And in Indiana, Trump came here. Remember, he had that rally in Indianapolis. I wasn't here yet, but it made national news. We're all following it because he was making false promises.
Mhm. Oh God,
We
yes.
Go back there and remember those false promises. If you haven't, folks out there, read America Made. It was a book about the factory here in Indiana that closed down, and it followed that journey. And 3 different factory workers, what happened to people when work disappears. those were false promises.
Yes.
Those were false promises. I cannot say it again. That factory still closed down.
Yes, it did.
It did. And, and I can understand, I don't have to agree with it, but I can understand why people could buy into those false promises, because if you go back, and this is what we have to re-educate people and talk to people about. If you go back to Clinton, you guys remember NAFTA, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who
When
can
NAFTA,
forget it? Yeah.
you can't forget, and we were entering a globalization stage in the world economy, and the mindset was we got to join in or we're going to be left out. And the promises made under Clinton, under NAFTA, was the folks down in Mexico could be in to buy our products. They would raise their lifestyles,
Work standards,
work
and
standards. They wouldn't
chance
be
for
coming over
unions. Yeah.
Yep, they wouldn't be going over the border as much, and NAFTA would create more jobs than lost. That was the argument. Okay, we all know that the tariff protections that came in, that didn't really work as they foresaw it to be. Okay, but the goal was to get the United States in a more globalized, competitive economy. Okay. Fast forward, in Indiana alone, there was 24,000 jobs lost because of NAFTA come 2010. So as you can see, the landscape is getting a little prime for people going, okay, you sold me a
bill of goods that didn't
thank you.
happen. Yeah.
Yep, bill of goods. Thank you. That didn't happen. Obama was struggling with this set of voters because they felt lied to, or things happened the way they thought they were. Because half of the union population was in for Obama and the other half was not, because they were like, wait a minute, you told us you were going to fix NAFTA. You were going to fix these things in 2008, but then the economy crashed. So that really became the focus. Okay. So fast forward, Trump comes along and says, I'm going to be your savior. But that didn't happen because we entered the global world with China, right? Same thing under Clinton. Okay, we had these we invited them into the World Trade Organization. So all these international things came. But as you've pointed out, Mark, that I'm learning talking to you, is during that process, we forgot about the worker.
Right.
Is in those trade agreements, the white collar worker did quite well, but in the trade agreements, the worker hasn't done as well. But we also have to remember, Trump did not do anything for the worker.
Nothing
And
at all.
we're seeing the mistakes that were made with that agreement, and they're being corrected and course corrected. I would agree. Would you agree with that, Mark? That now these things are being recognized, that, or talk to us, talked about that journey.
Well, the thing is that once the whole thing started with Clinton gets full credit for it, and I sent a letter to the president at the time saying, I can't believe you're doing this. What are we doing? It's the corporate Democrat type of perspective on it. It's not the working class Democrat type of thing, but that's a separate issue altogether. It was started under Bush Sr. This whole thing was something that was brewed up 4 and 5 years before Bill Clinton ever came onto the scene. So it was under their bubbling. And so once they brought it forward, they said, hey, we can get Democrats on board with this. We're going to do all these things and take care of a large portion of it. It was a 3-volume books that each of them, like 14 to 1600 pages in each of these books on NAFTA 1, 2, and 3. You had to read those to understand. It was so deep, I gave up. I just would randomly open book 2 and start reading through there, because the union president I worked with at the time had a copy of it. I was like, wow, okay, get to, that's how I based my letter to President Clinton at the time. Again, never got a response. I mean, they got a response saying, thank you for your letter. We appreciate your input, blah. It was the stock letter that they always send back to you. And wonderful that I had that. So my point being is that I didn't understand what was going to happen to him until I started meeting and knowing people who lost a job. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, people were building washing machines and refrigerators, things like that. Gone. That stuff's down, and because they couldn't compete with the financial end of per unit cost. Take that group of, let's say there's 300 people on a shift building those things, and you can do it with 250 people in Mexico for half or an eighth of that cost, because they're making cents on the dollar to what we're making. Well, you'll never compete with that. So the first thing they're going to do is close the doors here. All they're doing is working those last few moments while they build that plant in whatever town it's in down there. And then once they change their trade agreements with China, they're like, dang it, look at all this stuff. We should have built something in China. And the automotive industries and the rest have been building things over there for use in that market there, Korea as well. And then guess what? They end up on a container ship, and 3 weeks later, it's over here. So, I mean, it's all, we fight against ourselves with this. We just have to find the new things, which the chips Act that came through
Yep.
is a big plus for that. So we have to consider how and what we do and what we manufacture. Those are losses. Look at the shirts we all wear every day. Half of them are made somewhere else. You don't really have something sewn and put together here in this country, although a lot of that cotton's picked here and taken care of here and grown here. There's a lot of those things, those small things. I don't think they're really ever going to come back. We're not going to see those being built by American labor. We just have to find what those new things are that we can build and do and become that strength. But that's really tough.
And the other thing is, like, technology is changing things, right?
Yeah.
So more
Correct.
automation, more,
Productivity is up. We're huge.
it's up,
Productivity.
but also technology is changing how many people you need to do a thing, right?
That's
So
that's the key.
why are we
Yeah.
not retooling, right?
Yes.
The
Education.
workers, because what you brought up, the plant over on the west side of Indianapolis that was shut down. We didn't offer these folks anything to retool themselves for whatever else they could do. Why didn't we offer them like some type of training program to do, this job is gone. So when a job leaves, because I mean, honestly, a business has the right to do what they want to do, right? So why don't we, as the government, right? Why aren't we helping to retool these workers for something else? The fact that we just let people just die on the vine, essentially, right, without
Yeah.
offering another way to get them prepared for the next thing. I went to college at 35.
Yes.
Good
point.
I
Great
went to
point.
I went to
Yep.
college at 35, and
Lifelong learner.
yeah, and so I was able to like retool. I knew I didn't want to work at Pepsi forever. I knew I
Yep.
didn't want to drive a forklift forever. I knew that this was a young man's gig and I was about to be an old
Yeah.
lady. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So let me retool myself to get myself ready for whatever else. And by God, I thank God I sat still for 6 years to get my undergrad and my graduate degree so that I could be useful in a different way.
Yeah.
Right.
Why aren't
And
we
let's
offering
understand, I want to throw this out that there were programs offered to employees. Now, if you've been doing, you're 52 years old, you're not as employable as 42, as 32, as 22 is.
Baby.
Trust me, there's an ageism thing that goes on forever.
Yeah.
But that person also has a set group of costs to their life. So
Yeah.
they're saying, hey, go back to school. Excuse me, I need 40 hours of work. At the same time, I need to go back to school.
And my mortgage.
They can't just, and a mortgage, exactly. I have 2 kids going to school right now. I have a wife and her job's okay. And so for us to say, oh, we're going to give them these educational opportunities, which is what government does. And the state of Indiana said, we're going to provide them vocational we're going to offer these things. No one took advantage of it. Very few did because they couldn't stop working. They had to go find work elsewhere or move if they could to try and make that happen or commute. And they couldn't get to school because they're spending, if your day is 8 hours, but you got to travel an hour and a half each way to get there and come home, how is that working for you? Where do you find school in there?
And see, that's why labor unions are so important, because they have these things in place for
Educational opportunities
within the union. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see, you can forecast it's coming. When I looked more into this too, I noticed that when Europe enters into these trade agreements, there is a plan in place, a robust plan from the federal government level for the workers. And it is forecasted and it is planned into.
For
so that-
downturns, for whatever, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's not left up to the local governments in these rigged states. Notice I say rigged, not red, states that don't care about the workers. You get a
Right.
chuckle out of that, don't you?
I
Mark?
love it. I'm using that line. I'm sorry. I'm stealing that.
Well, guys, we have been doing this show now for an hour and a half, because apparently we could talk about some stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's do our. I mean, again, Project 2025 is going to hurt the average worker. Doesn't matter what demographic you sit in. It's going to hurt the average worker. And as we all know, as unions go, so does every other industry. Because labor
Right.
unions fought for a 40-hour work week, those of you that are not in unions benefit from those hard fought wins. But because
Thank you for the weekend.
the weekend
brought
and all
by
the
labor unions. Yeah.
all the labor unions. So even if you're not in a union or you don't feel like you need a collective bargain, trust, know, and believe if they're coming after them, they're coming after you next.
Darn right.
Because you have benefited from what unions have fought for. That being said, let's do our call to action, y'all.
Oh, I would say my call to action is get into it a little bit. Understand, just do a quick search for My Union and Project 2025, or just call it Agenda 47. You're going to find out that their whole thing, their big thing, is reducing union control in workplaces, implementing right to work laws nationwide, statewide, and weaken unions and allowing workers to benefit from union negotiated contracts out the window. That will change union wages, union benefits, and how Americans live. Trust me, the teachers are going to face it. You're going to face it. Even if you work in a non-union situation, you're going to have a bunch of rights taken away from you.
Absolutely.
The right to that break, the right to overtime pay, any of those things, none of that will happen. They'll be wiped away in one fell swoop.
All right,
Call to
man.
action. Learn
Okay,
it.
call to action. So I mentioned earlier before in the conversation about the impact of not running a candidate in every seat of the bus.
Yeah.
So I know there's many of you, there's probably about 33 or 32, my last count, of how many uncontested seats with Democrats that we have in the state of Indiana. So you're probably thinking, well, what can I do to have an impact? And, I'm going to call it out. Some people might be like, that's not the way to do it. But we need to focus on some of these seats that we actually can flip this year. So if you're in a state, you're in a district that you don't have anybody running and you're like, what can I do? I want you to think about whether to support Erica Watson in CD4,
Yes.
Heidi Bidinger in CD5, Josh Lowry in CD24, Tiffany Stoner in, I keep saying CD, I mean HD, in a
House
district,
districts, yes.
House District, in House District 25, Matt McNally in 39, Tom Horax in 62, and Trish Wickham in 69. And the reason why I say to support those folks at the state house level is because when you support the folks at the state house level, you're helping the top of the ticket and you're helping the county level districts underneath them too. So if we want to see some change in Indiana, we have to ask ourselves, what am I going to do this week? How can I help? And if you don't live near them, you can do phone banking, you can do postcarding, you can get in the car for the weekend and do some canvassing for them. All those things really, really help. So this is the opportunity for everybody to jump in and ask themselves, what am I going to do today?
And I'm going to add to that, Katrina Owens. Did you say her name? You were talking about House districts. Listen,
Yeah.
I'm going to add to that. Katrina Owens is running against Aaron Freeman in Senate District 32.
Good one. Yep.
Aaron Freeman is the worst of the worst. He does not even care how people vote. If he believes that he should be able to tell you what you can do, then he will do it. And your vote means nothing. Aaron Freeman is the worst of the worst. So y'all get out there and support Katrina Owens, who's running in District 32 against that clown. My call to action, and I'm gonna flip it up a little bit. Are you loving how you feel right now because the Vice President Kamala Harris is on the ticket? Are you feeling that joy and happiness when you hear Governor Walz talk?
Yes.
I want you guys to embrace this positive feeling because I don't always feel happy when I'm a Democrat because sometimes Democrats get on my nerves and I be wanting to hit them upside the head, right? Because I be like, stop being stupid. But right now, it just feels so dang good to be a Democrat. Right. My call to action is feel the joy.
Yeah.
Feel the joy. Because it's a good feeling right now. We have the ability to take our country into a positive direction if we make the right choices. So feel the joy. And I'm going to have a good time next week.
I can't wait for the stories next week.
Hey.
Get the stories.
I'm excited. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you. Live it through we're living through you.
I will share. Guys, thank y'all so much for tuning in to Let's Talk Indiana. We are trying to break down Project 2025 and how it impacts Indiana, the things that are already in place, and the things that could come if we don't show up. So y'all, till next time, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Click the like and subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.
Let's Talk Indiana is a joint production of Mary Noone of Campaign Strategy, Mark Gevaart of My Labor Radio, and Indiana's own Dana Black of Turn Left.